welcome. Good to see you all. Got a bunch of topics tonight, as we always do. I am going to see if I can get through them in a timely manner. Made a couple of loops yesterday and today, so I guess I'll try to do the same thing at the end of the show, but I'll try to keep it better within an hour. I'll try to do the 2 loops at the end of the show. See which one you want me to try to make into some sort of a track, and that'll be it. So yeah, great to see everybody. Where are we at? We're at Mr. Kordychek, Believe in Yourself, Quint Rankin, Lauren Sakai, Sergeant Bilko, Believe in Yourself, I think I just said. Andrea Moboy at 70 kilometers away from you in Victoria, so stay safe there. Steve from Berkeley, boom, indeed. The J Vlog, salute there. Steve from Berkeley, I think we just had Tokyo 503. Great to see everybody in there, and welcome. How's your week been? From my end, first thing is that the fixes for the time control function, which will be a pro feature of MyChan TV, those fixes are in. What they're going to be basically is it's going to make it work properly. First of all, you're going to be able to say how many minutes up to or how many minutes from. You can specify the duration of videos that it will autoplay from your subscriptions, as well as durations it'll read properly. The fixes are in. They're just currently going through a back-end sort of load, which takes some time to load in, but hopefully I'll be able to confirm that update this week. And yeah, then we'll be just setting up the new pro platform. So very much looking forward to that. So probably some big announcements around MyChan TV next week. So that'll be pretty awesome. Yeah, other than that, not a lot of YouTube news and stuff like that. Not really many big news stories going on in Japan either, but a few things to talk about, so that's always good. And yes, really, Lauren Sakai, you're like my biggest supporter, which I really appreciate. And it reminds me I've got to actually try to make a real effort to promote the site. I do appreciate, every now and again I get messages from people as well who like the site, and they I had someone offer the other day, say, for example, to get the old mobile and Apple TV app, which is something I really want to do. Hey, John Major, good to see you. John Major in Tokyo at the moment, won't be there for the Hanami. By the way, of course, mark it in your calendars. March 30th, be there or be square, the Tokyo Hanami, the YouTube Hanami. Information is going around on Facebook. I'm one of the co-hosts of it. Unfortunately, my dad's coming to, well, it's not unfortunate. My dad happens to be coming to Japan for like the first time in 15 years, and I'm taking him to Hakone that day. So I will make an attempt to get to the Nijikai, if whoever's surviving at that point. I know it's an all-day event, and people tend to kind of crash out a little bit early at that. I'll probably be like after 9 PM, but if there are people still surviving that I can catch up with, I will catch up then. I won't be able to make an appearance at the Hanami, but I'm giving what support I can to Zach. 900 people apparently have expressed interest this year, with over 100 confirmed. Normally it's like 100 expressed interest, so certainly it looks like it's going to be a massive event. Pretty much every Japan YouTuber that you guys probably know about is going to be there. Like I said, I will make an appearance, but it'll be later on in the evening. But certainly if you're in Tokyo, make sure that you remember to go to the awesome, massive Hanami that's coming up. And yeah, John Major, just messaging, you're visiting Tokyo, but you won't be around for that. So yeah, that would be good if we can. And this is maybe just a reminder as well. I don't do meetups mainly because I just assume. I'm always surprised that there are people interested in doing meetups. It's always cool with me. Let me know if you're visiting town or whatever and you like to say hello. It's absolutely my pleasure to say hello in person. I'm lucky. I'm not someone who generally has a lot of weird people following me. Generally, you guys have a pretty good consistency level at not being weird, and as a result, I'm always happy to go grab lunch or something like that. Indeed, all of that going on. The big YouTubers don't go anymore. Really? Well... Yeah, and yeah, certainly I'm looking forward to getting back down to Australia and all of that. Well, that's right, we're all weird in some way, all good sort of weird, but yes, indeed. Yeah, 900. I doubt there's going to be 900 there. I don't know exactly how Zach does it, but yeah, there we go. It's going to be perfect timing this year either. Well, there we go. So I think we're all the same. If we're weird, we're good kinds of weird, and I think that's a good way to be. It's going to be a little bit weird. You don't want to be too not weird. I remember actually, who was it? BLK UNK would describe me as white bread, and I was like, Oh, he's got no clue, which is like awesome. I love being underestimated. So yeah, Tikyo Sam, there's a barrel of monkeys right there. Yeah, and he's always a lot of fun to meet up with, and yeah, I meet up with him. He's doing crazy stuff at the moment, by the way. Subscribe level not unreasonably weird. Yeah, I think that's a pretty good description. So yeah, that's the My-chan TV stuff. In terms of like the videos that I cut out from this week and things that I saw during this week, I did cut out the little section on the Gaijin effect, what I was talking about last week, the impact that foreigners have, how we kind of morph the discussions that other people have around us, where they're not talking about us, but how somehow just being in the room makes people suddenly spontaneously talk about international things. Hey, John Anderson, boom, from London, good to have you in. Yeah, I thought that was a good clip, and it was good to shout out Aussie Awesome because he makes awesome videos, so I did that. Also, in terms of Japan Business Time, every Wednesday night new episodes are going out. It is a great season. It's really timeless. It's it's something you can probably catch up and watch at any time. There is a playlist that I've made of the videos besides, so you can catch up. I saw some people today catching up and dropping little comments, which was nice to see. Do remember with Japan Business Time that we base the topics of Japan Business Time every time we record a new season on the comments that we get in the comments that are left, in the permanent comments that are left on the video. So one, I love it when you join me for the premiere. That is a lot of fun, and it's fun to live chat about the topics as they're going on, which I do. But at the same time, if you've got an idea for a topic that you'd like Rochelle and I to talk about, and Rochelle and I are already talking about meeting up somewhere and recording another one of these now, because they're always a lot of fun, especially to watch them recorded. Remember to come back and leave a comment in the video comments of any episode, and we'll go through every single comment, and we'll go make a list of topics for our next discussion. It's basically just a matter of getting a camera, blocking out about 2 hours talking, and we get, we aim to get 12 episodes. We got 9 this time. So definitely, yeah, go catch up. So last week, last week was about changing jobs. This week that we had just before was about internally transferring within a company and the sensitivities that can happen with that. The episode that I've just set for this Wednesday, so I've just set the premiere countdown. I think some people are getting agitated having all of them counting down from like weeks ahead, and I was getting down thumbs with people saying it's too early. Yeah, is lifetime employment changing? Another really interesting topic, and it's a good discussion. So I'll look out for that this Wednesday. But don't forget, just catch up on the season. I mean, they're always really, really good to watch. And nothing really important is that there is, if you are in Tokyo, Rochelle is holding a working effectively with Japanese seminar in English. She does them both ways. She does ones for Japanese working with international companies, and people in international companies, expats working with Japanese. And there's one aimed at expats, so in English, for March 14th, 2019. It's a full-day course. I've taken it. It was really good, and it was different to the Japan Business Time. It's actually very structured and useful if you ever want to come work in Japan, or if you're working in Japan. I can't express enough how I think this is like the most awesome thing ever. It is a corporate rate, you can see there on the screen. However, if you put in the promo code HIKO30, which I'll also put in the business information here. I am putting it in the information of the videos, but let me type it in there. If you're having trouble convincing your work to let you go along to Japan Business Time, to working effectively with Japanese, tell them you get that you can get a special 30% discount by HIKO30, not HIKO3. That you only get 3% discount for that. That's nowhere near as good. HIKO30. HIKO30, you get the 30% off that, whatever that is. So I guess it'd be like 24,000 yen. Obviously it's not cheap, but I tell you what, even if I know some people have paid it on their own dollar using the promo code, and it was worth it. It went really well. Hey, Tai Nakamura, I'm sorry I only caught the end of the live stream that you did with Simon Chanoma the other day, but yeah, it was really cool to see you. I liked you playing the guitar outro. I wish I could do that. Great to see people rocking into the comments there. So, the Rochelle stuff, I mean, I don't need to tell you how good she is. She's like, seriously, the most knowledgeable person in the world. She writes in the Nikkei Shimbun, she writes in the Yomiuri Shimbun, she writes in Japanese newspapers, like top Japanese media about this stuff, and she talks about it in English. It's actually, it's pretty cool that, we managed to get her. I mean, it's just cool. We just have very good conversations that we both appreciate, and that's why she gives me the time to record these things. So yes, support them, check them out, and certainly if you ever have the opportunity, get along for the working effectively with Japanese. So changed around the formula last week, where I'm going to try to put some of the more important stories first, so I can adjust my speed a little bit better at the end of the show. Had a bit too much cheese with dinner, a bit thirsty. So yes, anyway, let's get into the first topics that we have. And there are some really good articles, of course. The new immigration law. In fact, let me make this so I can cut this more easily if I make this a standalone topic. Oh, good night, Andrea Mulware. Well, nice of you to pop in, and stay safe with the fires, and have a good night there. Okay, so, and now I just realised I feel like I'm going to sneeze, so I'm just going to give it a minute. I think I'm okay. I'm going to leave that. Okay. So, one big topic with Japan right now is that the new immigration law, which is basically aimed at letting in 360,000 migrants on new categories of work visa, primarily categories of work visa that were until now only open for Japanese to work in. Generally, that only allow foreigners to come with special or high-skilled or specially designated jobs. But with the recognition of all the different sectors of the economy that are having worker shortages, and how many companies are going out of business, simply not because they're having trouble selling or being efficient or anything like that, it's that they can't hire enough employees to keep producing. This is causing a sufficient economic crisis in the country that the government's put in radical proposals which have changed the and you know what, this story is out of sync. Never mind, I'll go ahead with this anyway. Has gone ahead with radical proposals that will allow many more foreigners to come into Japan doing all sorts of different jobs, not just the English teaching, not just bankers, not just the sort of, strictly limited things like nurses, for example, things like regular factory workers, basically categories that until now were not open are becoming open. And Nippon.com, which is a fantastic site, you should all follow it, is just done a little bit of a feature on Japan preparing to become a little bit more multicultural, a little bit more diverse. And the best example of this really in Japan right now is right here in Tokyo, Shinjuku Ward, which is where I was living previously. Now 1 in 8 residents there are foreign nationals. It's a massive number, and I do remember every time that I went to the Shinjuku Ward City Council office, there seemed to be more foreigners there doing paperwork, marriage paperwork, visa paperwork, moving house paperwork, that sort of thing. There seemed to be more foreigners than Japanese, to tell the truth. When I was there were remembering this is the number of foreign nationals, but also bearing in mind a lot of the Chinese and a lot of the Koreans are married to Japanese, for example, or half their Japanese citizenship, but they're from international families. These are the foreign nationals. So really, even though 1 in 8 sounds like a big number, it's even more than that. And yeah, it's perhaps been look at that. Foreigners totaled 551,000 in Tokyo. Now remember, this is just in Tokyo. For the whole nation, native English speakers, Americans, Australians, Canadians, British, in total there are about 30,000 of us. There are not that many. And when we talk about 551,000 foreigners, we're talking about Chinese, Filipinos, Vietnamese, Koreans, Brazilians, Iranians. You get a long way down the list before you get to people who speak English as a first language. But that said, Shinjuku is a really good representation of what the future in a lot of places is going to be when we increase the numbers of foreigners. Also interesting as well, Blade Runner was actually based, the setting and imagery of Blade Runner was based on northern Shinjuku apparently. The Ridley Scott apparently was inspired by his time specifically in that area, again a long time ago before it became quite so foreign friendly, but I think it gives a kind of an interesting indication. In fact, look at this, they've got actually for the 23 wards in Tokyo and the western Tokyo, the 26 cities in all, they've got the foreign number of municipal residents and shared by the municipality. So Shinjuku spikes, they're at 12, just over 12%. Toshima, which is Ikebukuro, which is a massive Chinese community, obviously sticks out there as well, as does Arakawa, more affordable sort of areas. But yeah, Setagaya and Western Tokyo, Hachioji, have less. I guess Hachioji is less convenient. Setagaya is generally quite wealthy, but also very, very, standalone house, very residential. So yeah, and the main nationalities of Tokyo residents. So here we go. In 1985, you can see then roughly nearly 2/3 were South and North Korean. The number of North Koreans has dramatically dropped, not because they've gone back to North Korea, but because, frankly, all of those South Koreans and North Koreans in 1985 were people who were actually born and grew up in multiple generations here. Particularly around 2000, with the trouble with North Korea over the abduction issue and other things. Many of the North Koreans basically naturalized and became Japanese citizens. So you can probably take of that blue South North Korea chunk of the pie. It was probably about 1/3 North Korean, 2/3 South Korean, but that 1/3 North Koreans have become Japanese for the most part since 1985, and probably actually for the South Koreans as well, at least for the people who are Zainichis, people who are ancestors of people left behind after the war. You're now getting, from the 4th, 5th generation, so a lot of them becoming naturalized Japanese now. They changed the rules to make it a lot easier. And as a result, Chinese have become the biggest chunk. United States, look at that, they did used to be a big chunk, although remember the overall population was a lot lower back then. Now when you look at the next largest populations after South Korea, there it is, Vietnam, and there were like no Vietnamese in Tokyo like 10 years ago. This has popped up all of a sudden. Hey Andy, Andy DeVirgo. Hey Andy DeVirgo, good to have you here. And check it out, Philippines, the next largest group. Nepal, wow, I didn't realize that Nepal had jumped up so fast, but there it is. Taiwan being listed separately to China, and yes, that's always sort of been there, but becoming prominent. The United States comes in next after Taiwan. So actually, the United States still has more of a presence than I thought, but bearing in mind, there are something like 20,000 US military personnel around Greater Tokyo, so most of it is from military presence. India, again, that's coming up really rapidly. Myanmar, Thailand, and others. So certainly diverse. And yeah, Nishikasaya, a town that I used to live in, has become Little India. And I remember the very first dormitory, the very first Indian dormitory for IT workers in Nishikasaya was right beside where I lived. I used to go over there and watch cricket, and I loved the food, so it was great for me. But now they actually set up a school and everything over there, so that was really, really cool. Just day to day, it's pretty much impossible in Tokyo now to go through a day without interacting with a foreigner in a convenience store at the very least, if not in multiple other places. Hey Shizentai, so there are a couple of other stories around this which I thought were interesting as we go into this. So it looks like I didn't organize these as well as I thought I had. NHK, again, building up to the law change to allow more foreigners in. When I got to Japan, the number of foreigners in Japan was 1 million. Now it's already 2.6 million. 2.5 times greater than 30 years ago at the start of the Heisei era. Look at that, there's a little graph there you can see over time with the density and distribution of foreigners increasing over time. Again, another graph by overall foreign residents by country throughout the country, and again you can see how China used to just be a small little sliver in the middle, and now it's gotten, and the Korean, North and South Korean has gone down and down over time, mainly due to North Koreans naturalizing. Foreign workers by industry, agriculture. Well, I guess this is mainly due to the apprenticeship visa system that they have, because normally you can't get agriculture visas, although you will be able to now. Of course, huge needs in these areas, but right now, still even then, only 7%, down to like 2% in IT. But again, the needs for people in each of these areas are increasing rapidly, and these are the areas that are going to be liberalized, so there'll be more people in fishing, manufacturing, hospitality, things like medical care and so on, because there aren't enough people to sort of staff all of these sectors of the economy. Article here just sort of features the lives of some people, foreigners living in Japan, including those who attempted considering naturalization. I must admit, with naturalization, for me, I guess two reasons I never did it myself. One, for a long time, the New Zealand passport is just one of the best passports in the world, and I figured, why would I have an inferior passport, given that I'd have to renounce my New Zealand citizenship in order to have Japanese citizenship. However, now the Japanese passport is better than the New Zealand one. Japan's really made an effort with that. The Japanese are pretty much welcome in any country. I guess the other reason was that having a son, I wanted to give my son the chance to inherit New Zealand citizenship and be able to attend university and so on in New Zealand. Basically, it's a get out of Japan free card if he wants it. And it's probably worth maintaining it for that, just to give him maximum options. But at the same time, I mean, it's an increasingly positive choice, I think, to choose Japanese citizenship. So that is what's happening with that. However, at the same time, if you use Mitsubishi Bank, as many people do, basically at the moment you can make cash, but you can go to a money machine with cash and do international wire transfers from the cash machines. However, the bank's been getting criticism that this can be used by organised crime syndicates, money launderers and so on. And so in order to put a stop to that, they've just basically, they are going to put a block on ATM machines being able to do cash remittances. If that's something that you do, you're going to have to go into the bank and actually do a wire transfer, or do it via the internet, but it's going to be in a way that's going to be more traceable for your identity, apparently. So that is shutting down. Another thing, by the way, and this is probably relevant to that, I mentioned the other week how there had been a 7-Eleven in a rural area that they just couldn't find any more staff. So in Tokyo, they're so dependent on foreigners for the staff to keep these 24-hour convenience stores open. One of these rural places I mentioned the other week, unable to find staff to, and 7-Elevens run like a franchise. They sell these franchises, and there are certain rules that the franchisees have to operate under. And there was this rural 7-Eleven that did not have the staff to be able to stay open 24 hours, and basically the manager was staying in the place, sleeping 5 hours a day, just basically to keep the place open, and was on the brink of sort of, basically facing health issues and worried that he was going to work himself to death. So he asked for an exception to be able to shut down from 1 a.m. to 6 a.m. or something like that, just so he could get some proper sleep. 7-Eleven told him that if he broke the rule that 7-Elevens have to be open 24 hours, he said they were basically told him to give up the franchise or pay a $170,000 fine, which he took as being work yourself to death or pay $170,000. It drew enough sympathy and attention that there was a national conference of 7-Eleven owners that requested that there be some flexibility in cases like this. And 7-Eleven actually conceded on this week. They actually went and agreed that they will allow 7-Elevens to be open in shorter blocks in certain cases, which I suppose is good news for the owners. I have sympathy for them, but at the same time, this is exactly why they need more foreigners, particularly in small towns. So yeah, it's a pretty big fine, Barry Bonds, and welcome to the show. Yeah, again, this is what we're seeing all over the place. It's the lack of workforce is actually causing crises everywhere, and it's forcing really rapid transformation in the Japanese economy. It'll be really, of course, the problem is that what the government's really done is they've opened the floodgates to allow people to just come in. But frankly, where they've tried this, like on the apprenticeship system, it's obviously gone pretty badly. It's been really mismanaged, and there have been a lot of cases of worker abuse and so on, which aren't really resolved at the moment, and yet they're going to open the taps further on this. And most city councils and governments are not as prepared as Shinjuku for handling all the extra foreigners that are coming in. So it's going to be a really disruptive time. We'll see. I mean, I really hope that Japan, manages this properly, for the sake of the foreigners and for the sake of the Japanese communities. But we'll see how that goes. And as indeed, as Steve from Berkeley says, there are 7-Elevens in the US that are not open 24 hours a day, and even in Japan, there actually are. If there's a 7-Eleven inside a building that locks down, the 7-Eleven will close for those hours. And what the shop owners argued first was that they should be allowed. There are already exemptions that exist, and surely they could treat this like that. But apparently, in the first instance, 7-Eleven said no. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see what happens. Okay, I need to briefly, a bit hay fevery at the moment. Let me just pause this for a minute. Right, so yes, as we were actually doing the show last week, the results of the referendum from the Okinawa base referendum were coming in, and I extracted that. The end result of that was, I was a little bit confused by a few aspects of it. There was a 52% turnout for the vote, And of the vote, they were given three choices, which is they support the relocation of the Phtemma base to Henoko, they oppose the relocation of the Phtemma base to Henoko, or they don't have an opinion either way. There's a 52% turnout, which is a high turnout. Typically on referendums, you don't get more than a quarter of the population turnout. So there was a very high turnout, and of those votes, 72% of people who voted that they were against the relocation of the marine base at Phtemma to Henoko, to this reef, where they're basically reclaiming a reef to build a new reef, to build a new marine base. It came out it was 43% against, 111,000 for, and 52,000 were neither. The way the NHK reported these numbers in the Japanese press was that it was a 39% vote, rather, was it 39 or 36%, whatever, 36% voted against the move. And I was puzzled why they would say that, or not 72%. It looked like a sort of a national conspiracy to downplay the significance of the vote. However, I figured out later on that wasn't the case. What was actually happening was that the governor, the ordinance which he passed to justify the referendum, said that basically it wasn't binding, but he would have an obligation as governor to deliver the message of the result of the referendum to the prime minister of the country if the vote either way, or for any of the options, reached above the threshold, was 25% of the Okinawan voting population. So the overall vote came 36%, I think it was, of the total voting population, 72% of the people who showed up to vote. So it ended up being more than enough, and this week Denny came and delivered the message to Abe that yes, the majority of Okinawans have clearly stated that they do not want the national government and the US military to relocate the marine base at Phtemma to Henoko. And Abe said, yeah, well, tough titties, pretty much. He pretty much said, we've agreed this with the US, we don't mean to change our plans, we still think that the base at Phtemma is the most dangerous military base possibly in the world. There's been lots of lives from accidents and crime around the base, as well as we still feel a pressing need to return the land of the Phtemma base to the local owners. And we don't think that this referendum, although it reflects the will of people overall across Okinawa, it doesn't necessarily reflect the views of people in Phtemma, who the national government are prioritizing with this move. So pretty much they more or less said, yeah, we'll take that under advisement. Hey, the soft distortion, glad that you just made it. Welcome to the show. So yeah, there was a result, and it doesn't look like it's really going to change anything, but it does give the new Okinawan governor, Denny Tamaki, an opportunity, to raise the issue with a little bit of moral authority with the central government. He also suggested that he wants to go and deliver the result to the US military leads and to the US, what do they call it, Secretary of State. Abe said he doesn't think it's a good idea for domestic prefectures to go and speak directly with foreign governments. That's for the central government to do, so please don't do that. Please don't bother the Americans with this. Of course, it's been covered in the international press. I talked a lot about the background of this. So obviously, a lot of Okinawans are just basically unhappy that they're being they want the base they want Phtemma to be shut down, but they don't want it to happen in a way where the Marines just move to another part of Okinawa because they feel like they're already hosting too many Marines. And as much as the Marines contribute to the economy and to the security of Okinawa, clearly pretty strong turnout in this referendum and a pretty decisive result that people feel that the burden of hosting US forces there is too great. They're not voting to get rid of all US forces, but certainly they believe that there should be a reduction, and that the opportunity from this relocation should translate to a reduction in US forces in Okinawa. So interesting outcome, not likely to have an impact in the near future, but you're going to see the ramifications of this play out in the news. Last week I actually cut out, I thought it was kind of fun how I recorded just the live version of the track. I'd already queued up all the loops, and I haven't done that the same way this week, so I won't be able to do it the same way. But I posted myself recording the proper recorded version of the same track, which I've just called Glide and Chill. Been on a bit of a chill hop sort of a bent lately. I've been enjoying listening to that. Yeah, that track is on SoundCloud, and if one of the tracks today turns out to be okay, I might record that and put that on SoundCloud as well. Quint Rankett has a question: how do they feel about Chinese forces in Okinawa? That's an interesting question. There may very well be some people in Okinawa who would prefer, well, again, Okinawa is it's like everywhere. It's a complicated place. You have your Cortezes and you have your Trumps, and within every little village, within every prefecture, within every country, you have all of the different groups. And certainly in the case of Okinawa, there are people who there's a very small minority who are like pro-independence for Okinawa. There are certainly people who are open to North supporting. I mean, remember, Japan has a pretty strong left-wing tradition of supporting North Korea primarily, less so China, even though the Japanese Communist Party is a very strong communist party. It's not affiliated with mainland Chinese Communist Party or other communist parties abroad. Yeah, believe me, there's probably sympathy. Certainly, at least to the extent that if you're a victim of crime by U.S. personnel, or property confiscation by U.S. personnel, you might ask, well, from that perspective, what's the difference? I mean, the Chinese, to their credit, haven't done anything yet to the Okinawan people. Yeah, don't feel like people don't. There aren't some people who think that the Chinese might make no difference to having Americans and still being occupied by a foreign power. Whoops, we just had my smart speaker go off there. But yes, obviously, I think certainly the majority of Japanese very much appreciate the defense and they understand the importance of the defense relationship with the US. But the point about this referendum is that US should not take it for granted. They should remember it's important to maintain good relations with their host. Yes. This was kind of funny. You might recall, again, I've covered this in previous weeks, the statistics scandal. So the Ministry of Health, Labour and Welfare was collecting economic indicators from employers, and it turned out that they've been using a statistical method which was against that prescribed by regulation that the bureaucrats had to follow, and the way it was skewed, instead of doing a total survey of all companies within the sort of scope of large companies, they were just doing surveying the third biggest of those companies, which is producing skewed results because those largest companies pay higher salaries, which was making Abenomics look more effective than it appeared to be. It turned out this has been going on for about 15 or 16 years. It also turned out that people became aware that this was happening and it shouldn't have been happening a few years ago, but they all were a little bit paralyzed about what to do about it. And the opposition's been digging in, saying, was this influenced by the Abe cabinet coming and visiting and suggesting this, and basically fostering it because of the positive outcome in terms of the perception of Abenomics, which was confusing because certainly the data's been showing an overly rosy outcome when other indicators like general polls were showing that people were not feeling the benefits, but the economic statistics were saying that people are feeling the benefits, and obviously the general polls were correct. So the people who are being dragged into Parliament, basically there was a look in to see whether, one, the inappropriate statistical methods were developed with malintent, and two, if they were deliberately sort of covered up, basically, if there was actually intentional hiding of this. The survey was more or less an investigation by the Ministry of Health, Labour, Welfare into itself, and it more or less exonerated itself and felt, no, they didn't, this was an innocent mistake and no one covered this up on purpose, which the press and the opposition's pretty much dug into, saying this is just them letting themselves off the hook. Even if they didn't maliciously set up or try to deviously set up this sort of favourable economic statistics method. Certainly there seems to have been an effort to keep it under wraps when people became aware that it was problematic. They were not immediately forthcoming with the information. Hey Ken, hey Kong, good to see you. So the idea that there was no cover-up at all seems a little bit too much for some people to believe. So that is continuing to be the biggest topic at the moment in Parliament. This is a good one. Give me a moment. So the Toyota Twitter account this week, it is funny that they do things every now and then that get them into trouble. And, again, who knows who really allows people to be in charge of these Twitter accounts. But the Twitter account decided to put up a little Twitter survey, and the Twitter survey was, to all the lady drivers out there, we have a question. You know, you really aren't very comfortable driving, are you? Please let us know what you think by voting below, options below. Yeah, I really am not very good at driving. I'm a little bit uncomfortable driving. Neither one nor the other. I'm quite good at driving. These are the 4 choices. Please select and vote. I haven't actually checked how the results for this came in, but apparently the tone of it, which is, you know, やっぱり女性、やっぱり車運転って苦手ですよね。苦手ですか? Basically, it's kind of a way of saying, you know, you really do suck at driving, right? Is more or less the tone of the thing. Toyota is actually saying to all the lady drivers out there, you really suck at driving, right? You really don't like driving. Tell us what you think, ladies. Do you really not like driving? Are you really terrible lady drivers? Toyota Motor Corporation put out a tweet asking if, hey Mogberry Pie, good to see you. Asked all the lady drivers if they were happy to admit on an anonymous survey that they sucked, and particularly being pointed up here was, you know, the kind of, you know, leaning in, like, come on, we know that you really suck at driving, you really don't like to drive. Also, the way that the choices were given is basically 2 negative choices, a neutral and 1 positive. Basically playing up the whole way that this was set up was basically to generate a negative result. So naturally, women's groups all over the country are, of course, celebrating the wonderful equality and balance of Toyota. They're very upset, they're criticizing. This has not worked out well. Oh, what a feeling. Sexism. I must admit, you know, it's funny, you can take Toyota out of Japan, but I guess you can't take the Japan out of Toyota. It's incredible. Toyota's doing so well. I do get the feeling at the moment the US, of course, is putting more pressure on Japan to release non-tariff trade barriers, i.e. the fact that Japan just makes better cars that people want to buy. And perhaps this is Toyota's way of trying desperately to make their cars slightly less popular to address the trade imbalance, because, you know, it's not like they're going to let the American car makers catch up in quality. So perhaps sexism is one way that they can sort of balance the trade deficit. I don't know. They did later put up a deep apology, I think, from the bottom of their hearts. They put a message later on. Oh, so here's the message that they put up later on. 女性の運転術量が男性より欠けるかのような不適切な表現がございました。We use an expression to imply that women do not have as do not have as great driver skill as men. 多くの方に不快を思いをさせてしまいましたことを心より深くお詫びを申し上げます。と時した。We to all of the many people who felt pretty put out by this inappropriate comment, we deeply apologize from the bottom of our hearts. Toyota, why did you do that? What a stupid thing to do. Well, like I said, I can just imagine there's probably an old man who, sitting in an office in Nagoya somewhere who's not allowed to touch the Toyota Twitter account anymore. I shouldn't be laughing, but it's so ridiculous. You have to laugh at it, right? So they still make good cars, but and I don't know, like for example, if they're about to release like self-driving robotic cars that people don't have to drive anymore, and they were selling them as like girly cars, I mean, I wouldn't bother me. I'd buy one of them, but what are they doing, right? Where was this leading? Where was the survey going to? Like, I can't even think. How even in a self-forgiving sexist mind, I can't understand how this could have been forgiven. So Toyota must try harder, but still doing better than Nissan, at least, I guess. So this was interesting. Yeah, the order of my tweets got a bit mixed up this week, actually, so I'm sorry about that. I thought I'd arranged it properly in the Flipboard. So there's a blog here, sort of on Yahoo News, talking about the experiences of foreigners who, in spite of the free medical care in Japan, or not free but highly subsidized, basically as good as free, still don't have good times in Japanese hospitals. And particularly the things that they find difficult about Japanese hospitals. And certainly I think what can be said is that if you're used to American hospitals, of course, they cost you, they're crushing. You can get one hospital visit, it can be hundreds of thousands of dollars. That if you don't have proper insurance, even with insurance, it can have you paying off debt for years and years and years. It can really ruin your life. All that money is going into highest tech medical care, beautiful hospitals, all this sort of thing. But it's just that people can't really afford it. In Japan, of course, it's more affordable, but you are going sometimes into 1960s style sort of hospitals with long waiting lists and so on. So there are some Russian people living in Japan. What problems they had with Japanese hospitals, the ones that didn't like it, and the points that come back to are basically coming back down here. Where were they? It was sort of like old, the food wasn't very good, the staff in some rural places would shout out people's names, mispronouncing it, and they'd laugh about it. Apparently they felt that the sensitivity towards privacy of some of the patients, like talking out loud about the case in the earshot of other people and so on. Just that general sort of care wasn't quite up there. The general sort of respect for patients just wasn't there, just the sort of attitude. All of these things sort of resonate, but that said, flip it on the other side. I actually met a person the other day at my kickboxing who had just had a brain tumor operated on. I had a couple of blackout episodes, went to a hospital, had 90% of it removed, so it was successful. The remaining 10% they couldn't take out. And she was back at Muay Thai, so she's obviously recovered from it well, but she was really happy with the care that she got. I mean, obviously it saved her life, and she could afford it, and she's not from a first world country, so that was a good case. Another counterpoint to this was this video. If you guys don't watch Dogen on, if you don't follow him on Twitter or watch him on YouTube, you have to do this. He lives in Kyushu. He speaks perfect Japanese. I mean, if you live in, where does he live? Like Kumamoto? Not Kumamoto. He lives in Kagoshima. You have no choice but to have perfect Japanese down there. It's just it's as hardcore Japanese as you'll get. He does a little skit where he's having someone from the hospital explain the medical fees after he's just had twins being born. And there's a twist in it which will show all the the positives of the Japanese medical system, and how, as an American, he is extremely confused by them. This is an extremely good video. I'm just thinking, can I even play this? It's so funny. How do I get this to play? I think I've got to click down the bottom. It won't let me. In fact, I can do it this way. In fact, he's posted this straight onto Twitter, so you've got to follow him, Dogen, on Twitter, D-O-G-E-N. I wonder if that'll play. Congratulations. I'll break down the hospital bill for your twins now. Great. This is going to hurt. Your wife was in the hospital for 1 week. Those are the overnight hospitalization fees. Right. These are her meal fees. Yes. These are your kids' vaccination and diaper fees. Understood. And lastly, the actual operation fee. Got it. That's when we factor in your insurance. The total is, here it comes, approximately $1,500. Is that all? Correct. However, seriously, in the States, it's supposed to be over $10,000, so I was really worried. Dogen, well, you won't be paying these fees. This is the difference between the medical costs and what your insurance covers. Right. Do you understand? No, I don't. $1,500 was left over, so your insurance company will be sending this money to you. No, I don't. Your wife had twins, however, so the money will actually be double this number. Hey honey, can you translate? You'll also receive congratulatory money from your work in about a week. I'm sorry, that can't be true. Yeah, they pay you to have babies in Japan. It's brilliant. He's got the best Twitter account, just generally, and he's very funny, and he seems to be a really cool guy. So go follow Dogen on Twitter and go watch the original yourself, because it's really, really awesome. So that was good. We had the overseas cash transfers thing. In China, some of you have heard about this social credit system in China, which I think is kind of interesting. So when this was announced, I don't know how many of you watch Black Mirror. Do any of you people watch Black Mirror? For me, the first episode of season 3, called Downfall, is basically what it sounds like. The Chinese government watched and they thought, this looks like a really good idea. And Downfall is this sort of dystopian kind of utopian dystopian future where everybody is basically hooked up, where their entire lives are connected to their sort of social credit, which is basically they have to force acting nice to people and presenting themselves in an idealized way to keep getting points and likes. And if you have a certain amount of people liking you all the time, you get certain benefits. But if you're like rude to somebody and they like thumbs down your service or whatever, and your score goes down, you lose privileges. So for example, you become unable to book flights. Instead, you have to book rental cars, but the class of rental car will become worse. And gradually, and the thing is called downfall, where somebody gets into a spiral from having a very high score through cumulative bad luck, getting into a worse and worse score where they're not able to do anything. And China thought, well, that sounds like a good idea. It's a really thought-provoking episode. It's not presented in a realistic sort of a way, but the concept is actually really interesting. And what was really interesting was that like about 6 months later, the Chinese government announced they're starting exactly this. They started a system where they would track the social credit of tracked people, and basically where your social security would be hooked up with your social media. And for example, you could increase your score by doing volunteer work or by helping people out, but also by posting nationalist sentiments online. So for example, being literally a nationalist right-wing troll will be a way to boost your scores, which is slightly alarming. But at the same time, if you do antisocial things like I assume anything criminal, but apparently other things as well, criticizing the government, I suppose, would be one of them. But just being generally things where you can be scored for being rude to people, for example, there'd be ways to feed back into the system that you'd be scored down, and based on that, apparently the result is already their social credit system, I mean literally like in Black Mirror, has blocked tens of millions of plane and train tickets. Now of course the instant reaction by everybody is that's scary, that's terrible, China's scary. But at the same time, I do remember thinking a few times, I remember talking with people about how when they see fellow countrymen acting like yobs, basically, right? Like basically people, party abroad, tossing garbage off balconies, walking around, just basically embarrassing everybody else from their countries. Soccer hooligans going through Europe, Australians in Bali, going around with no t-shirts and, getting drunk. And you always sort of think, wouldn't it be nice if there was some way that you could ban yobs from going overseas? And China has this problem. A lot of mainland Chinese, particularly from the Cultural Revolution period, aren't educated and apparently are extremely embarrassing to the generations that came after them, and they travel abroad. Lately, only recently, the country's become wealthy. And there are all of these problems that we get in Japan with Chinese tourism, of misbehavior by these elderly tourists. And this is kind of a way, I suppose, constructively to prevent those people from leaving their country and embarrassing everybody. I mean, again, it's kind of dystopian, but at the same time, there are aspects of it that I can see are not entirely a bad idea. I mean, you don't want to, again, you can see the negatives that can happen right away. The fact that this is linked to political affiliation, loyalty to the Chinese Communist Party, and being a nationalist troll and all that sort of stuff. But at the same time, the idea that Neostar Yoba represent, yes indeed. So, yes, it's interesting to see how this is building up. And I tell you what, I mean, I don't know that we're all necessarily going to become like China, but I could easily see ways of that same kind of social control, even indirect, could very easily become a thing in the near future. So I thought, even though that's not Japan, I just thought that was interesting, and the fact that it already is happening and it's working to an extent. Mulberry Pie, I know you're from South Africa. I don't know if you'd appreciate rugby at all. I know it's always something. When I meet Indians, I talk about cricket. When I meet South Africans, I talk rugby. The Sunwolves, after 3 years in the Super Rugby competition, a Tokyo-based team, although they have to play half of their home games in Singapore, which is terrible and unfair given that they're a new and not a strong team. They've played 24 games since they were founded outside, away from home, basically, in New Zealand, Australia, South Africa, and they've never won a game away from home. They beat the Chiefs, the New Zealand centrally Waikato Chiefs in Hamilton at home yesterday in a brilliant game. They really played a fantastic game. Of course, the Sunwolves, it's a professional club. It has a lot of international players. In fact, it was noticeable that they have even fewer Japanese players than last year. This is partly because the Japanese clubs haven't really supported the Super Rugby team, which is disappointing, but at the same time, it's a team made up. It's basically like a dirty dozen. It's players from South Africa, players from New Zealand, players from Pacific Islands, players from Japan, all getting together. That is, I think, Michael Little. He's son of Walter Little, who is a legendary All Black. He's also an awesome player from New Zealand. Chiefs, by the way, from New Zealand geography purposes, I was born in Chiefs territory. I support Auckland. I've lived there the longest, but I'm from Papakura, which is in Chiefs territory, and I like the rugby that Chiefs play, so normally I'd support them, but I always support the Sunwolves. I love the New Jersey. I love the rugby that they're playing. 24 games, they finally get a win, so that was really, really, actually really good. So I was super happy about that, and congratulations to Sunwolves. However, the downside, another thing that's happening with rugby, and maybe you guys don't care so much about rugby, but basically there are roughly about 15 competitive rugby teams, 16 competitive rugby teams in the world. The Rugby World Cup always has 20 or 24 teams. But apparently the richest 12 countries have decided to get together and put together an international league of nation-to-nation rugby, where they basically decided that in spite of the fact that there are very competitive countries, Georgia, as in former Soviet country Georgia, Fiji, Tonga and Samoa, which have at times been the 5th or 6th highest ranked countries in the world, and they produce some of the best players in the world. I mean, there are many Samoans and Tongans who play for England, New Zealand, Australia. They took the other citizenships. They're just factories for some of the best players in the world. World Rugby got together and decided to set up a competition for the top 12 countries, excluding these countries. Even though they're inside the top 12, they don't have enough money. Instead of them, they're going to put in Italy, America and Japan, even though they are lower ranked than Georgia, Tonga, Fiji, Samoa. And these are some of the most exciting teams to watch in the world. And even in the New Zealand press, people are saying, wow, they really got screwed. And even the New Zealand Herald, my local town newspaper, is saying, yeah, you know, the Pacific Islanders should stick it to World Rugby. If they're not going to get treated fairly, they should boycott the Rugby World Cup in Japan this year, which would be pretty devastating because, you know, they're such a huge draw card for the World Cup. And what do you know, the Pacific Island rugby players are getting together and they're going to have a vote on boycotting the World Cup over, because this new deal for this new 12 rugby team competition is going to be for 10 years. It's going to mean basically Fiji, Tonga, Samoa and good Georgia are going to not only not get to be in the competition, but they're not going to get test matches against any other strong teams for 10 years. It's going to destroy rugby in these countries. It's incredibly disappointing and short-sighted that a big solution like this doesn't include them. And as a rugby fan, my father's from Fiji, you know, I'm a huge fan of Samoan rugby. The Tongans have been coming up really well lately. The Georgians, it's amazing that they're not in the Six Nations when you have a country like Italy that Georgia would just cream if they were there. You know, are not getting credit for it. So that's disappointing, and it looks like it could endanger the Rugby World Cup. It'd be really, as much as I really want the Japanese Rugby World Cup to be a success this year, and as excited as I am to have the games come here, at the same time, I'm with the Pacific Island nations on this. If they want to boycott, I think they're entitled. They've really been mistreated over this, so that's a shame. But yes, I see some comments back there. The Kang Ekong mentioning the Fukuo system is already restricted for Chinese. That's right, which is basically a similar system to what Japan used to have in the closed nation period as well. And now they have credit ratings to restrict them from going overseas. Yes, indeed, it's a way of controlling, you know, people basically, which is unfortunate. There was the story I was mentioning earlier about 7-Eleven restricting operating hours. I've got 4 minutes left. I am going to do a couple of the I've only got one story left, so that's good. 2 stories left. They're both about Korea. Korea, 2 things. First thing, the summer with Trump. How did that go? Well, it looks like Trump just went there to sort of do a big performance and sort of mock Kim Jong-un. And you know what? I mean, Trump's kind of a troll, but in this case, I'm kind of going to give him a pass because, frankly, when you look at the way that North Korea has pretty much played America and South Korea and tried to play Japan and everyone else, they basically engage dishonestly in international relations. So, and they get away with it because other nations don't operate at their level. But now you have a president in America who more or less is quite happy to operate at the same level as North Korea or lower, and they're sitting there left in Vietnam kind of shocked when he just walked out, really for no reason by the sounds of it. They said that the North Koreans wanted, all sanctions lifted at once, which turns out probably to have not been correct. But it turns out they probably weren't even interested in listening to what the North Koreans had to have. They just wanted to go and make a big display of walking out and looking tough, which is fair enough. I mean, it's not going to do anything, obviously, in the short term about the nuclear issue. Not that the North Koreans are supposed to have fixed the nuclear issue in 1996, and it showed bad faith that they didn't fix it back then. They did raise the abductee issue, which of course was probably easy because they weren't trying to make a deal. But it's good that they did that because the North Koreans have not shown good faith over that issue either. So, you know what? I'm not a fan of Trump at all, but at the same time, it's like when you watch two bullies get into a fight with each other, you don't really care that one of them gets beaten up, right? It's sort of like, I don't feel bad for Kim Jong-un at all. I mean, I hope that North Korea does normalize. I hope that it opens up and all that good stuff. But yeah, they kind of deserve the bit of the cold water treatment that they got from America on this. We'll see. Exactly, Mr. Kordyship, he out mad dogged them. I mean, their whole strategy, as I've said before, is mad dogging people, and they got mad dogged by a mad dogger. So there you go. Speaking of mad dogging and bad faith, I hate to put it this way, but of course, Korea on Friday had the 100th anniversary of the foundation of the anti-Japanese imperialist independence movement, which in itself was a great thing and played a great role in the liberation of the Korean Peninsula at the end of World War II, of course, by getting rid of the Japanese colonial oppression and occupation of the Korean Peninsula. Moon, the president at the moment, who is currently dealing with a bunch of corruption scandals, has gone back into the old beating up on Japan thing to sort of try to get some support and some positivity going towards him. And he's basically said, if Japan would just do one thing to just try to, heal the pain of the victims, if Japan would just make some sort of gesture, just an apology or some money or just do something to try and address this, then it would all be better. Basically, this is just another case where I was thinking about how to put this, and the way that I put this is that I have a great grand aunt, who, until she died in the 1990s, boycotted German stuff. Now, the rest of my family didn't boycott German stuff. My dad had a BMW, loved the Germans, obviously history is history, but it doesn't mean that you have to be tough on German people. But at the same time, she remembered the Blitz. She, held them responsible for the Holocaust, and her feeling was that personally within herself, she was unable to forgive the nation of Germany, and she stuck to her right to hold on to all the way through the rest of her life, boycotting them. And I wouldn't say it was hate, but it was just a decision that she didn't need to. Germany didn't need to make up with her, and she didn't want to make up with Germany. And the point was, I think that's okay. When Japan does a lot of historical wrong things, Korea is perfectly entitled to say, screw Japan forever. Screw them. We don't want to deal with them. I think that's okay. What the problem is when they say that they want Japan to make up for it, but they're not sincere about it, because Japan is engaged sincerely. 25 apologies, the 1965 Diplomatic Relations Treaty, which included reparations for the colonial period, the 1990s Asian Women's Fund, the Comfort Women Compensation Fund from just 2 years ago. Japan's tried to resolve these issues in good faith multiple times, and every time it's the Korean side, and every time they're drawn into it by, Lucy holding the football saying, Charlie Brown, this time that's okay, I'm going to let you kick the ball. And every time Japan ends up back on it, flat on its back, and Korea's there sounding perfectly reasonable, saying, hey, please, just one more time, just come and truly heal the victims. And it's pretty much, this is just something that Japan's just going to get played on forever. And Korea's entitled. They don't have to forgive Japan. They don't have to give Japan the opportunity to make amends. But I just don't think they should be insincere about it. And again, I live in Japan. I've lived here 20 years, so my perception is the perception of someone who lives in Japan, observing this from Japan, and the bias that inherently comes with that. But I don't take that as being a good faith statement. These things are, Japan's tried to resolve these things and has agreed with different Korean governments to do so, and every time it's been undone for internal and external political reasons. That said, of course, this was the National Anti-Japanese, Liberation, Movement Day. So it's a day that you're supposed to say Japan sucks, and they're entitled to do that. But yes, I don't know. At the moment, the relations between South Korea and Japan are pretty much about at the same level as North Korea and Japan. They might as well be the same thing. They're low, and it's not really easy to see how they can come back up. Mogberry pie, but why ask for things and then not forgive? Well, again, I'm biased on this perhaps, but my perception is that Korea wants to appear reasonable before the international community. They want to make it look like they're being reasonable, and they want to put Japan in the position of appearing unreasonable. When they go out and say, Japan has never apologized, all they have to do is pay a little compensation, it'll be okay. And everyone says, yeah, Japan. Japan always is going to look like the bad guy in this, right? Japan was the colonial aggressor. They were the colonial oppressor. Korea was the victim. I think they're frankly playing up for international sympathy, and I think they're doing it for domestic politics, because the president's currently embroiled in a bunch of scandals, and it always looks good to be, fighting against Japan. So, unfortunately, that's the way it always goes. Yeah, I don't see relations improving for a while, and I must say, in my 20 years here, I'm probably the least optimistic that it's possible or even worth the trouble of trying to improve relations with South Korea right now. Like I said, I think they're just going to keep doing their thing, and Japan isn't really going to be able to influence it. So that's a bit of a downer to finish the show on, but that just kind of is what it is. I've got 2 tracks. I'm going to play 2 loops to you right now, and please tell me, everybody, which one you want me to make into the proper track. One thing I noticed, by the way, in the recordings was that the mic really picks up when I'm breathing. It's really annoying. So I'm going to see if I can turn off the big mic while I'm recording, and when I want to comment, I'll turn it on again. But I'll try to, when I concentrate, I breathe really hard through my nose, and I realize it's kind of distracting. So I'm going to see if I can try not to do that so much this time. Let's go to the cork setup, which I hope... Oh, this was working earlier. Wait a minute, this is a bit twisted around. Let's plug that in. If I do that, sometimes it takes a second. Okay, let's plug that in. And these are the 2 loops anyway. And this is the other loop. On a lo-fi kick lately, so I put a lo-fi filter on both of them. Okay, that's 1 and 2. I'll make either one of them into a live track. Both are a bit lo-fi-ish. I've got some filters which I installed. One vote there for loop 1. Any other votes there? I'll take the first 5 or 6 votes that come in. Like them both. There's 1 each there. Second one, can I groove quantize the bass melody? Yes, I can. I think I can adjust that. Although it's hard to do actually on the track. I mean, Korg is kind of limited how much you can play around with that. 2, both, 1, 2, 1, 2, 2, 2. I see a few runaways at the end there. It looks like it's about 7 to 4 there voting for the second loop. So yeah, I quite like both of them. 3.14, that's a different thing, Sergeant Bilko. Okay, so I think we're going to run with loop number 2. Just a little bit disappointed I can't share the screen at the moment. Let me just let me play with this one more time. This might cause a pop. Okay, so it looks like I'm not going to get the screen today. That's alright. You'll only get sound, but let's do loop number 2, and I'll record probably both of these during the week. I've got this kind of lo-fi, chill hop kind of vibe thing lately, so I'm going to try to make some more tracks like this. Have a good week, everybody, and Yes, there is Mulberry Pie, March 30th. Check out information on my Facebook. Oh, don't forget to like. That's the show. I'll play the other loop maybe next week. Don't forget, check out SoundCloud. I'll probably make this into a track. Japan business time this week, 10:30 p.m. Japan time on Wednesday. There's going to be another great episode talking about how the employment system has changed since, well, in the last couple of years. And have a good week, everybody. Hope you enjoyed the track. See you all later. Neo Star, great to see you. And have a good week, everybody. Boom, peace. This is a nice track. I like this, right? I'm going to make more tracks like this. See ya. I could do this all night. I did some variations. I'm just going to play around with this. It's kind of funny, even that worked. Oh damn, this is too much fun. That's too strong. That's kind of nice. I'm gonna stop. Good night, everyone. Peace.